Hi, and welcome to Spooky Owls. My name's David Saunderson. The Spooky Owls is a broad church. You know, a lot of us believe in many different things. Some people believe in ghosts. Some have religious inclinations. Others believe in monsters. Some people believe in almost anything. But there's a really long, wide, broad church. Now, interestingly, I met a fellow recently, a fellow named Peter Laws, who is a ordained Baptist minister, but he's also a fanatic when it comes to horror, ghosts, all sorts of things. Now, for some of us, that sounds a bit strange because we read about in the past about the church being against all sorts of things. Even the talk of Harry Potter is Satanism. So I wanted to talk to Peter. I wanted to talk to him about his beliefs and how I mean, there's no reasons why anyone can't enjoy ghost stories or anything like that. So I'm not coming this from a judgmental. I just really want to know, well, what does Peter Laws believe? What does he think? So we're going to talk to him. He's a great bloke. He's got a podcast that you're all going to want to hear if you haven't already heard it. I think I've come pretty late to the story when it comes to Peter Laws because I've been looking at his website and all that kind of stuff. It looks bloody brilliant. So I'm really excited about seeing him today, talk to him about some spooky stuff here on the Spooky Owls. Hello, Peter. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And that was a really sort of garbled introduction there because I look at your website and there's so much to you. I don't want to put you in one box.
Yeah, to be honest, there's almost too much in a way. I don't know if you've ever felt like this, but I am literally interested in everything. Like if I'm at a party or something and someone comes up and they say, "Oh yeah, I don't know, I make bricks for a living." But really, tell me about that because I find almost everything interesting. Therefore, I end up getting involved in lots of things. But if it's weird and if it's spooky and if it makes me feel unsettled and potentially gives you a nightmare, then I am especially interested in it.
So what? One of the things I want to talk to you about today is why people enjoy being frightened. Because I know that's one of your passions is understanding why do we like to be scared? Because it's kind of a silly kind of thing when you think about it because we want to feel safe. What is it? Answer the question for me now. Why do we want to be scared? Why do we like it?
I mean, it's a kind of multifaceted answer, and I wrote a book on it called "The Frighteners: Why We Love Monsters, Ghosts, Death, and Gore." But the reason I wrote that book was precisely because it does feel like it doesn't make sense that if we were scared of something, then we probably would not want to gaze upon that thing. But you only have to look at practical life to see that people tend to do that. An example would be during the pandemic where, people are really quite frightened about the potential of dying or catching COVID, and really quite an unsettling time. That you would think, therefore, that the trending films on Netflix would be happy-go-lucky rom-coms and Disney films, but actually they were films about pandemics and really quite realistic, scary ones. And that's because we're not stupid. We're human beings are frightened by things. I'm frightened by things. Like I'm frightened by death. I'm frightened by violence and all these sorts of things. But I don't feel comfortable enough to pretend they don't exist. But equally, I can't handle just looking at them dead on with no filter. And so I put a filter on called, well, entertainment. That it becomes something that is manageable inside a story or inside a legend. And so it touches on the things that are scary, but it also brings in this element of control, an element of fun. And that psychologically actually is quite empowering. And so that's one of the reasons why people do it. It helps us deal with our fears. And sometimes people look at me and say, "Oh, do you like all this kind of dark stuff? Because do you get all excited when somebody gets stabbed?" You know what I mean? Or like, oh, did you hear the old guy died last week in his bed? Are you excited about that? I'm like, no, I'm really kind of creeped out by it, but something in me flips it into a intriguing scenario, not because I'm enjoying it, but because I'm scared of it, and I want to domesticate it into a story.
Okay. Well, that's interesting you say that because you are an ordained Baptist minister, and
Yes.
there, and therefore presumably believe in life after death, or that you will, go to heaven when
Yeah.
you die. Why are you scared?
Well, because I think I'm like any other person in the world in that I have plenty of room for doubt. So, some people think that if you have to choose between two camps, you have to be either a full-on skeptic or a full-on believer, and you need to make your choice. But actually, I find, particularly the older I get, the more gray things are, the more I'm like, I'm not fully sure. So when it comes to things like God and hope and love and all of these things that I'm drawn to, my feet point towards that, and I move in that direction. But I have plenty of room to think it could just all be some cosmic joke. God might not exist, and this might just be some sort of salve to help me. As long with my horror films, maybe God is part of that. So as long as there's room for that, then there's room for genuine fear that maybe there is nothing after death. And so yeah, it's I don't know. I think there's too many kind of tribes and compartments for people who say, oh well, I'm a religious person, or I'm a ghost person, or I'm a skeptic person. I think a lot of people are kind of, we're on a similar quest. We're kind of trying to ask the same question, like, is there anybody there? And for some of us, spooky things have been a doorway into those questions for years, since being a kid.
Yeah. How did you become a minister?
Well, I grew up very anti-church. I was very dead set against Christians, particularly. I was in a band for a while called Creatures of the Night, which was like singing songs about spitting on the Bible and like God being crap and all this sort of stuff. And I used to give the RE teacher a hard time, and I got drunk once and crept into a Bible study of a local church just for fun. And while I was in there, I gave them all a hard time about being Christians. And then I had pre-written a little note, which was supposedly me gathering a group of witches, a local witch coven, to destroy the local Christians, because I was thinking all epic. And I thought, if I slip it down into their sofa, they're going to discover it one day and they're going to think that the satanic panic is real. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but I had issues with them because I felt they were coming in to control me. And so I didn't want anything to do with that, particularly if they were going to tell me I couldn't like spooky things. But it was actually later, when I became a student at university, that a few things happened. Had some friends die unpleasantly, and just various things that were kind of stressful and made me ask bigger, deeper questions. And so I became a Christian, which was a shock to everyone, never mind me. And then became a youth pastor for a while, and then ended up, becoming a church minister of like all ages. Although these days, even though I'm still ordained and I still do some chaplaincy work, sometimes I spend most of my time in the spooky world now. Writing and podcasting. That's kind of my main thing.
Yeah. So it was kind of the convert becomes, someone that's so against something takes it, and that's a story that happens often, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's if you ever meet someone who is dead set against something, it doesn't mean that they're less likely to find that thing appealing at one point. It probably just implies that they care about that thing enough to be bothered. Whereas it's the people who are like, oh well, you be you, I'll be me. Like that's fine. It's a fine attitude to have, but they're probably not that bothered.
That's right.
I was annoyed. I was annoyed at the idea of Christianity taking away your personality and also forcing you into believing things that I just didn't agree with and still don't agree with. You have to be anti-science, or you have to be against homosexuality, or you have to, be not allowed to watch horror films and just watch PG films or U films. I think I had so many stereotypes about Christians. It was only when I met some actual real life Christians I was like, oh, you're allowed to be questioning. You're allowed to, have doubts. You can choose this path as a direction, so that made a difference to me.
Yeah, I still think that you probably find that it is a broad church. There would be many Christians that would be exactly the way you thought they were, and then there's the nice ones where they're saying just get on with it, enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and I've had experiences before with I did a radio interview once with a Christian DJ DJ presenter. That's the word I'm looking for. And later, I discovered that they had organized a group of people, a team, to pray for safety because I was coming in, and they felt that I would probably bring some sort of demonic force with me
Yeah,
because I like these sorts of things. So there's definitely some kickback against it. For
yeah.
me, but a surprising amount of Christians who would almost like closet horror fans. I remember when I was working as a minister and little old ladies saying like, well, Peter, I do really quite like Hammer horror films, but I've never said that before because I thought it would be frowned upon. I want to celebrate people, however weird they are. And I'm particularly drawn to morbidly weird people.
Morbidly weird people. So
Yeah.
you do like the really strange stuff, because I mean I quite like it. I mean you were using that that example of someone died, and what did you think of that? I mean, I don't want to know about that kind of stuff. I think that's horrible type things.
Yeah.
I mean, I always use this as an example that I really find it funny that my wife will not watch horror films. She watches horror films. She'll absolutely watch horror films. She's sitting next to me. She's watching them. But she's much more comfortable watching films where serial killers are stabbing people to death and real life stories than,
Yeah.
a Wolfman, I mean, I don't understand. I think the Wolfman thing is a fairy story. There's nothing particularly horrible about it at all.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree. I'm with you on that because like my wife is quite happy to watch straight up crime fiction, and I mean I'm a novelist too, so my books tend to be in the crime fiction section of Waterstones. They don't put them in the horror section. I think that's a marketing thing that the publishers do, to be honest, because crime fiction is more marketable and it is kind of crime fictiony. But I sometimes find just watching pure crime stories a bit depressing because they're ultimately just about people being stabbed and killed and then somebody figuring it out. Whereas if anything has the thread of the supernatural in it, it just turns the colors up of the entire experience. And it makes me leave that film or book and think, hey, that scary thing I just watched might have just given me some hope for the future. I've been working, last year I worked on this BBC show called Uncanny, which is about, like ghosts and stuff. And the presenter of that, Danny Robbins, is very similar in that regard, in that he is fascinated by ghosts because they have a sense of kind of hope, a hint that maybe we do last forever. But of course, then the scary bit comes in, which is like, crap, there's lasting forever, as in walking up and down the stairs of an old mansion, like do the same thing over and over again in total despair. Maybe it'd be better to be an atheist, So
that's right. Yeah. Well, as we say, there's lots of broad of what people believe and stuff like that, and I don't know that if ghosts are real. I always think that myself. Like, do you believe in ghosts?
I'm open-minded about ghosts, and I think what persuades me about ghosts is just the relentless amount of people who have seen things, and I can be quite cynical. So if someone sits there and tells me a story and I'm like, oh, okay, like I saw my grandma at the end of the bed, 2:00 in the morning, and I'll tend to just in my mind is kind of filing it into hypnagogic hallucination, But there's certain cases, particularly ones that came up on Uncanny, but other ones, more documented ones. I write for the Fortean Times magazine, and they cover in quite a lot of depth some hauntings, and they just get so. All the different evidence comes up. And so if you come at it from a skeptic point of view, you can say, well, I can explain that bit, or I can explain that bit. But to explain the whole is sometimes really stretches credulity. So I'm persuaded, if I'm going to fall off the horse, that yes, there is something. What it is, I don't know. Some Christians would say there's no such thing as ghosts. They must only be demons or angels. I'm not so black and white as that.
There's ghosts in the Bible, though, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not demons.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of particular evangelicals who tend to say that they have to be demonic, or they'll say the ghosts in the Bible are demons ultimately.
Okay, well, as we say, large group, large church, people believe what they like. So I think it is interesting, and I think it also comes down to who the person who's telling you the story. Like, I've met people that I wouldn't believe them if they told me, the sun come out outside just because the way they act. But there'll be other people going, look, because it takes a lot of courage for someone to tell, for some people to tell you, I saw a ghost, because they think that you're going to mock them or you're going to disbelieve them. So if someone's got this courage to say, I saw something, I really don't know what it was. And there's a lot of the people on Uncanny are like that. Look, I didn't believe in anything. I don't know what it is. I'm telling you like this.
Yeah, and I always used to think that people were into ghosts because they would join paranormal groups and watch the Spooky Owls stuff and read the Spooky Owls blog and stuff, because ultimately they were like me. They were on a quest to try and find a sense of comfort in the face of the the onward march of cold death. It's like, no, I want something warm. But when I was writing The Frighteners and I was interviewing different people who had were into the paranormal, I really started to realize, hang on a minute, not everyone comes at it from the same point of view. Many people are interested in ghosts simply because they were walking along one day. Everything was totally not about that. And then they had an encounter which was so inexplicable that they've almost spent the rest of their life trying to figure out what it means. And that's a very different way in than my way in, which was more of a kind of, I want there to be something, rather than facing something one day or one night.
How were you as a kid, though? Because obviously you had this anti-Christian thing going on. You were a rock star, like that. Maybe you were, but you were a musician and you were spitting and you were doing all these horrible things. But where was the pure spookiness in what you were doing? Like, was there any of that?
Yeah, certainly. So, on the one hand, the only spirituality that I dismissed was Christianity. Like that was the only one that annoyed me. Everything else I was open to, and particularly open to the paranormal. And so, in my teenage years, me and my friends would go on ghost hunts, and I made a Ouija board in woodwork at school, and used that like quite extensively for a couple of weeks, and then I actually took it back in and sawed it in half with an industrial saw, because a few weird things happened with it. But I used to do the Ouija board with my friends all the time. I'd be like the dude at the party, at like 2 a.m. saying, everyone, it's Ouija board time. And so we do all of that. And, but then I remember, experimenting. I got a witchcraft book, and I was reading this book of spells, and it was like something about astral projection. I went, I'll try that. And I was in my bedroom trying to astrally project, and some people would look down on me for that and say, like, "Oh, you're messing with bad things." But I tend to look at the heart of the person, and that's just a person trying to find hope and comfort at a time when there's some difficult things happening around me, and I think it's the same for many of people who like spooky things. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. You don't have to have a big metaphysical quest around it. It's ultimately just really good fun. But there's a purity and there's a nobility, I think, in asking these fundamentally human questions. And that's why I celebrate people who like this stuff.
Yeah, and that's what we do here on the Spooky Owls. It's all about celebration of spookiness, and that's why we have people like yourself. Because when we have lots of people over the years we've spoken to that claim to have psychic abilities, or they hunt ghosts, or they even just write ghost books, or they do all sorts of things.
Yeah,
and we all come from it. It's just you seem to come from it from every single angle. And as you said on your website, there's just so much there. Like you write for the 40 Times. Tell us about your podcast, because you have so many irons in the fire. I want to understand on what is it you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. I do 3 podcasts, which is again a bit greedy, but one of the first 2 are kind of fairly standard, I suppose. They're still good, don't get me wrong. But when I say standard, when I tell you the third one, you'll understand why I say standard. So the first podcast I do, the main podcast, is called Frightful, and that is scary true stories. I do that for an American company, so it means that halfway through, as I'm talking about, and the family turned the guns on the children, I'll suddenly have to say, are you getting your vitamins today? Well, go down to Walmart for 10% off. So that's got advertising in it, but all members of my Patreon get that for free. So that's Frightful, and that's kind of the main one. It's a very popular one. It's quite popular, actually, which is amazing to me. and so that's scary, true stories of the paranormal and true crime. The other one's called Our Curious Past, which is about interesting and forgotten things of history, but normally with a weird and spooky edge. And the third podcast I do, which is kind of a passion project of mine, is called Creepy Cove Community Church. And that offers full and immersive church services broadcast from a mysterious fishing town where all horror movies actually happened. So it's literally, you put your headphones on and you're listening to a church service with, you know, Freddy Krueger and Pinhead and you know, Leatherface as part of the church. Jason Voorhees does the jogging class. It's really weird, but it's supposed to be. It's designed to encourage people. So it's got a sermon, which is more about well-being and just encouraging people. It's not preachy. I'm not an evangelical type. It's got hymns in it, but they sound like John Carpenter music, like Goblin or something. But it's just a way of trying to like encourage people with horror rather than say to people, stay away from that.
Yeah. So it sounds like that one's more of a, I was going to say, it sounds like an art project. Or, you know, you're doing all sorts of things.
Yeah, it is kind of like an art project. You know, it's been amazing. I mean, to get messages from people from around the world who've said, you know, this has been a core source of strength for me at difficult times, or for all of that to come at the same time as having like wacky horror stuff in the midst of that is very rewarding to me.
Yeah, and it is the spice of life. All this stuff, adding the little bits to it, making it more accessible to everyone.
Yes, exactly.
What are the? You said a lot of the books you're writing are crime. You know, they're fitting in the crime section. What's the kind of stuff you would read? What podcasts do you listen to other than things that you're involved in yourself? What are you consuming?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to podcasts, but I often listen to kind of weird surreal comedy podcasts. I'm a big fan of Tim Heidecker, and I went to see Neil Hamburger recently, who's a comedian who's just totally he does anti-comedy in the sense that he'll tell jokes that just aren't funny, and I find that funny. So I like quite contrary, I suppose. But I do listen to other podcasts that I listen to one called Eerie Essex, which is a good kind of folklore show. And Uncanny, I've just started listening to the Witch Farm, the new episodes of that, which is really good. There's another show called Out There Paranormal, and there's so many podcasts out there to choose from, and audiobooks. I listen to quite a few audiobooks.
Yeah, I tend to do that when I go out for a walk, but it's been a bit cold lately and I've been a bit lazy, so I'm a bit behind in all my podcasts and audio books. I haven't really started listening to I think I listened to half of The Witch Farm, but I want to listen to it. I listen to the Battersea Poltergeist as one, like, you know, day after day after day after day. I can't cope with having to wait a week for the next bit, so I'm thinking I'll wait to
you'll wait till the end. But I like stimulation, if you're steady on. But no, what I mean by that is like when I'm working, I have like a candle, and I'm sitting in front of 3 screens at the moment. So I'm working on the front screen. On the right, I might, like before when I was doing it, I had like the ambience of a haunted forest, and on this side maybe a kind of a mountain in the background, and there's all these sounds and stuff going on. And so, you know, when I listened to The Witch Farm the other day, I decided, I'm going to listen to that, but I'm going to watch a driving video from the Brecon Beacons because it's set there. And so I was just watching for like half an hour, some guy driving over the Brecon Beacons. And it sounded like I was listening to The Witch Farm on the car radio while there. I like immersive, which is probably why my podcasts are like, they're very high production value in the sense of kind of sound effects and music, because I just love being thrown into something and pretending. Like if my friends came around tonight and if they said, let's just go out and pretend there's a werewolf in the woods, I would be like, I'll do that. You know what I mean? Even though we're adults, like, it's just a lot of fun.
So do you like these kind of, they have the zombie runs and all those kind of things? And
yeah, I did a great one. This is a one for this book, The Frighteners. I went to an underground nuclear bunker in Essex and was chased by zombies.
Kelvedon.
Kelvedon Hatch, yeah. I was chased through there by zombies, which was just absolutely exhilarating. It was amazing. And I did a thing for the BBC with that book where I got blindfolded and put into a kind of Land Rover and taken into the middle of nowhere. And then I had to jump out of the car because the producer went all weird and started banging on the doors and then ran off. Also just walked off into the field, and we're like, what the hell's going on? And we had to get out, walk down this pathway, and found a mansion. Went and knocked on the door, and then it was answered by a witch and a one-eyed butler who took us in. And for the next 36 hours, no sleep. We were strapped to electric chairs, and we had spiders thrown over us at dinner time, and just totally wacky, crazy stuff happened. And I just absolutely loved it. There's certain extreme ones that I wouldn't go on. I went on the BBC. I did the BBC thing instead of one called Cracked, which is a very extreme one, which my friend Zoe went on. And but that was, being taken to the woods and then waterboarded and then, forced to your face put up against a tire on a car going at full. That's a bit more like torture stuff, and I'm not quite.
And is that a thing, or was that done? Was it a similar thing to you? Did people pay for that? What would the?
Yeah, people pay for it. It's like an extreme, like scare experience. In the same way as like I've got like a friend of mine. For his stag night when they were going out, they were overseas, and they'd paid for actors to stop the van, kick the doors open with guns, and have everyone on the floor, hands on their heads like that, and like shooting a couple of the guys.
Did everyone know that it was?
No, only like one or two people knew, but most of them thought it was for real. Like that sort of stuff is a bit extreme.
Yeah, I think it was one thing for you to go in and you were doing it for a TV show, but
yeah,
I don't know if that's a bit suable. I would have thought,
yeah,
if you didn't know about it. So, and I don't see how that's enjoyable though. I'd be, I sometimes these when you go on in the amusement parks, not roller coaster, not so much, and it's not the actual. It's what I don't like them. I just don't find them fun. I just
yeah. I mean, I'm not as into roller coasters because I get motion sickness, but psychological roller coasters I do get a kick out of. But again, it's play, and it's make believe. But to me, it's that doesn't belittle it. It's kind of, when we do these things, when we play around and we. Whether it be in a book or whether it be in a sort of weird scare attraction, we're exploring things that we are attracted to, that we're frightened of. To me, it's a really important part of being a human being, and to dismiss it as, that's just your silly hobby, isn't it? That doesn't make sense to me. And I was doing some interviews the other day, or some radio interviews, and it was for loads of BBC channels. And there were religious channels. So they kept saying, how do you balance your interest in like spirituality and goodness and love and all these nice things with your interest in horror? And I said, there is no balance. Like, it's not like I watch a horror film on Thursday and then spend the next 2 days in prayer and fasting to try and get it out of my system. And then I'm ready for another one.
Well, you're also not doing anything bad though. If you were saying on Thursday I was murdering children or something like that, and then on that's a different. I'm watching a show about a Frankenstein monster doing this. I mean, it's not this. You've not done anything wrong.
Exactly. And this, I think, is one of the fundamental things that people don't get who don't like horror. They somehow equate horror with real love of violence, and it just isn't like that at all. There's a similar thing again in the Frighteners. I talk about children and whether children should be shielded or exposed to scary entertainment. I'm not saying they should watch Human Centipede 2 at their 6-year-old birthday party or anything, but should they be allowed to hear very scary fairy tales, for example, those sorts of things. And in that, I talk about how the children after 9/11 and the kids who had their parents who died in the Twin Towers, for example, they were viewed in the weeks and months after the attacks of like building Lego planes and Lego towers and just repeatedly smashing them into each other. and people around were going like, "This is sick," like, there's something wrong here, and they're doing it in a very morbid, kind of just repetitive, wide-eyed fashion. And they started telling the kids to stop it, until the child psychologist stepped in and said, "Don't you dare stop them doing that. They have been through absolute chaos. They are trying to make sense of the most wild and disorientating experience of their life. And what do? They're not going to just pretend that it never happened, but they're going to take that which scares them and they're going to put it into patterns that they have control over." And that, I think, is exactly what I do when I write a scary novel or watch a film. I mean, particularly horror, which is a genre that is inherently generic. That's where we get the word genre from. It's kind of the same thing happening. And it doesn't matter if it's a happy ending or a not happy ending. It's just spending some time thinking about the dark while it's feeling like a kind of light experience. That's gold dust for the human psyche.
And you're controlling it. Those kids are controlling the planes. You're controlling the horrors on the TV, and you're basically safe.
Yeah, totally. And that's why, like, if you're in a situation where you're not in control, it's not enjoyable. So I just reviewed Terrifier 2, which is a new horror film which is one of the most graphic, violent films you'll ever see. The effects are amazing, right? But they are so brutal. But I can watch that and I go, oh my word! But I'm kind of getting a kick out of it because it's just such an amazing makeup and stuff. But so people can say, so you're desensitized to violence then? But it's like, no, because if I'm in the pub the next night and I just see one guy stand up and push another guy, and it unlocks a different part of my psyche. It just goes. And the tension goes up, and I'm like, "Crap! This is real. This is real. I don't like this." I mean, yeah, I do watch public freak out videos and stuff on YouTube and stuff.
But you're not there though. If it was standing next to you in the pub, or you saw someone have their face sliced off next to you, you wouldn't be going, "Oh, cool! Look at that!" Because you're just looking at a makeup that real. So there's a difference, and I think, and I don't know that there's anything necessarily. I don't particularly want to watch gory films, depending on what they are. But
I like all horror, from gore to gentle supernatural stuff. But I would just say, like, to any Spooky Isles like listeners, watchers, readers, that for most people, they're not bothered. It's just what they're interested in. But there will be some people who will think, is there something wrong with me? Particularly if you've got a partner or a parents or whatever who go, "Oh, are you watching this stuff again?" And there can be this sense of this lonely road of morbid interest. And I just always want to kind of put a hand on the shoulder and say, you're not just normal, you're brilliant, because you're thinking about, you have an ambitious mind. And you're not content to just sit and think about these four walls. You want to expand your consciousness, and that to me is a really beautiful thing, and I celebrate that.
Well, that sounds good. So it makes us feel all good and warm inside, knowing that we're doing the right thing. So we're now justified when we watch that next video that's got someone getting their head cut off. Now we're going to put all the details of your podcast and your books and all that kind of stuff underneath this video, so people could see it. And you've got your website, and that has all it on there.
Yeah, peterlaws.co.uk, or follow me on Twitter at RevPeterLaws.
What's coming up next? You've got so many things. Is there anything exciting on the horizon? It's post Halloween. So what's going on now?
Yeah, I mean, I'd point you to, I just did I was involved in an absolutely epic Halloween podcast project where I was part of this thing where me and a bunch of other American podcasters put on like a 5-hour episode of Campfire Tales. So that's out. But I guess I'd point people to Frightful because, just putting an episode out yesterday, actually, which is exploring a little known witchcraft case from America, which is spooky but quite heartbreaking. And that's available now. And Frightful is, ongoing. So I've just finished doing poltergeist sound design for another episode that's coming out in a few weeks. So yeah,
it all sounds like there's plenty on there for people when they've
Yeah.
finished watching the Witch Hour. It's the Witch Hour, isn't it? Whatever Danny Robbins doing at the moment.
Oh, the Witch
There's
Farm. Yeah, yeah.
The Witch Farm, the Witch Hour. There must be
Yes.
something. But the Witch Farm, there's plenty of stuff that you're doing, so people
Loads of
should
it,
not
yeah.
complain. There's not enough spooky stuff out there for them.
Mm.
Anyway, thank you very much, Pete. It's been wonderful talking to you, and
Thank you.
you've given me lots of homework to do. I've got to go off and listen and read and do lots of stuff. So anyway, you take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.